I was thinking of a quote. I think it was Pinochet in South America. For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law. And I was thinking about that as a quote against the backdrop of this week's parsha, Emor. Because we have a really, really famous piece of biblical law this week that we also really famously don't keep in our own time, which is kind of a fascinating one, actually. One of the most famous pieces of biblical law, but at the same time, it's one that we don't actually adhere to. And that is the famous, who here has ever heard that expression, an eye for an eye? Yeah, that's this week's parsha. We don't do that. We don't go around, we don't have a judiciary, a judicial system that goes around like poking people's eyes out and stuff like that. Probably for the better. And it's funny because we didn't actually innovate that in our own time. Sometimes we like to congratulate ourselves or think of ourselves as being so far advanced beyond the people of the Torah that we live in this, post-industrial information economy rather than the agrarian society of the ancient Israelites. But we weren't the ones who figured out, actually, that maybe an eye for an eye doesn't make great sense as far as law goes. Rabbis beat us to it by, 1,500 to 2,000 years, somewhere in that ballpark. And you can see, I believe it's in Bava Kama in the Talmud, where they actually outline that Torah's not being literal here. Torah's not being literal. This is supposed to be about financial compensation. So if you were to blind somebody, there is supposed to be awarded, in turn, you are supposed to pay what would be the equivalent financially of that sort of loss. It's interesting to me that they figured out a couple thousand years ago. We don't necessarily think of antiquity as the most, enlightened or civilized time, that actually that law in the Torah as we got it was kind of tricky. By tricky, I'm going to go ahead and say problematic. That the rabbis find a way to rework it, revision it, tweak it a little bit. And here's a truth that I think is really pretty incredible about Judaism on the whole. One of my favorite things about it, actually, is the non-literal reading of Torah. And that's not just me saying that as a rabbi of a conservative synagogue who got smicha from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College about 12 years ago. But actually, nobody in Judaism really just cracks open the Torah and reads it literally. A lot of Haredi communities and various Hasidic traditions, they say, you're actually not even supposed to do that. You might get the wrong idea. You need Rashi. That's why you'll see a lot of Chumash will come with Rashi's commentary, particularly in Haredi traditions, because you're supposed to have a guide to it. Now, what may differentiate us from our cousins in more traditional stripes and expressions of Judaism than the Haredi world, our commentators are sometimes different. The sources we look to are sometimes different. People who are part of the conversation, I mean part of the conversation, whether that is 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 30 years ago, we may have different folks sitting at the table in that big cosmic Jewish argument. But this Torah portion is amazing in that it gives an example of this whole Jewish enterprise of exegesis and interpretation. It shows it in motion. And I think it shows it in an incredibly sophisticated way. And it's not the only place it happens. It happens to be one of my favorite ones, but there's another great one, for instance. I'm thinking about when we get Amalek and the Amalekites. What are we supposed to do with them? Somebody? Anybody?
Okay.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, kill them all. The sound effect was a nice touch, too, as well. And then we get the whole episode with King Saul. Does anybody remember that one? Yeah, what happens there?
He didn't kill the king. Melech Agag.
Melech Agag, yeah, that's right. He didn't kill the king. And I'll add one more little step on it. He takes all their stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
The sheep.
Yeah, he doesn't burn all of their stuff, destroy everything, but he does, he wipes out most of them, but doesn't kill the king and takes their stuff and whatever. And through this whole twist and turn series of events within the prophets, we get this story that he falls out of favor, and this eventually gives rise to King David. But his big mistake there was actually this whole thing about not wiping out Amalek. So what do the rabbis do with that? They say, well, the Babylonians, the Assyrians actually, in 922, they come rumbling down from the north in Israel. And part of what they do in destroying the northern kingdom is actually uproot all of these different peoples and whatever. Not that rabbinic tradition is using the BCE date, 922 BCE, but like they're talking about the same event. And they also understood all of the Assyrian population transfers of moving people around. And so they say, look, because the Assyrians came in and wrecked everything and moved everybody around, now we can't possibly know who is Amalek. And so that injunction, that commandment to destroy them all, to kill them all, well, that's got to be gone. That's no more. You'll sometimes hear like time around like Purim, oh yeah, well, Haman, that was Amalek. And then, various people through the Middle Ages and whatever, we have the interpretive play where we talk about Amalek as sort of a mythical archetype within our tradition. But the actual Amalekites lost to history. And the rabbis say it sort of has to be that way because we're not going around wiping people out. Now, you could call that a humanitarian impulse on their part. You could call that a practical one in that they didn't really have the military means to go doing that at that time anyway. But either way, we laid that law to rest. We set it aside. Law deoraita, from the Torah no less, that the rabbis have sort of figured out how to sidestep and how to change and how to tweak and how to let it grow and evolve and flow into something a little bit different. This is the thing that I think is so cool about Judaism, is should we arrive in a place in which the law actually becomes abusive in and of itself, in which the law takes on that valence of Pinochet about, yeah, for my friends, everything. For the people I don't like, well, they get the law. That law is for them. We've seen corruption in Judaism before. We see it all through the prophets. We see it through the wanderings of the kings. We see the undoings of the kingdoms around some of this stuff. But the idea that the law is not some kind of thing set in stasis from 5,000 years ago, and God forbid you do anything with it or touch it, well, that's a very Jewish idea. And it's not even one that, I don't know, conservative Judaism or any kind of, reform reconstructionist. Nobody in contemporary Judaism made that up. That's part of the rabbinic tradition that goes back 1,500 to 2,000 years. That ours is a tradition that flows and that evolves and that grows and considers its values and considers and reconsiders in different ages what is and is not ironclad. Welcome to being a Jewish leader in that tradition. I think it's kind of cool. It requires a little bit of discernment. It can be dislocating at times in that, well, do we need to do it like the parents did, like the grandparents did, or do we need to do it differently? Well, what's the answer? There aren't any hard and fast solutions like that. It's a process of great discernment. It requires a little bit of rabbinic commentary maybe along the way too, but welcome to it. It's an honor to have been a little bit of your tour guide to it, to this part, and to getting into a Judaism that lives and breathes and evolves and has girls stepping up and leading Jewish community in ways that they did not necessarily, 100 years ago. But ours is a living, breathing tradition. 50 years ago, fine, Hamawa Osnat wants to make it even closer to now. I won't disagree. So I'm glad that you're stepping up and into leadership in and around this as a tradition, Mira. Welcome to it. Tradition needs your voice too as we continue to grow and evolve and think and rethink and figure out what's the law and figure out where it is and how it is we as Jews are going to grow over the next 50 years, 100 years, 2,000 years, whatever it is. But you get to help us with that. That's part of the exciting part. Shabbat Shalom.